would the executive be open to considering this evidence-based proposal as a pathway towards meeting our SDG commitments, even if it involves rethinking narrow, race-based empowerment policies?
Given that this matter raises serious questions about the integrity of the Minister's financial dealings and the glaring conflict of interest on the part of the Minister, with the startling contradictions in the dodgy loan agreement, illustrated by the fact that the Financial Sector Conduct Authority yesterday debarred and fined the Minister's financial advisor for his part in the VBS debacle, will the President remove the Minister and make the findings of this review public to uphold transparency and accountability in government?
Mr. President, if you acknowledge that the GNU has made wonderful progress, then the only explanation for siding with everyone but your GNU partners in Tshwane is that you either cannot or will not take a stand against the Premier of Gauteng and lead your own party. Mr. President, which one is it?
Order, honourable members. I'm tempted to say, what type of a question is that?
Thank you. Honourable E.L. Powell.
Thanks, Speaker. Mr. President, the DA acknowledges the importance of Africa securing permanent representation on the UN Security Council as the continent of the future. However, the recent democratic backslide across several African countries is deeply concerning. This includes rigged elections in Zimbabwe and the continued detention of pro-democracy activists in countries like Tanzania, Zimbabwe and Angola. Many governments on our continent seem indifferent to human rights and the principles of the UN Charter. So, should we achieve UN reform, will South Africa support the candidacy of countries simply because they are African, or will their adherence to the principles of human rights and democracy be a prerequisite for South Africa's support?
Mr. President.
Our support for Africa's representation on the UN Security Council and indeed on many other structures that involve global governance is obviously based on the principles that have been adopted by the UN itself, as well as the principles that have been adopted by the African Union, as well as SADC, where our country resides or is located. So these three organizations, including a few others that we are members of, have adopted principles that speaks to governance, human rights, and we also base our approach on our own constitution that continues to guide us in terms of what we do globally to promote a better world and a better Africa. So our participation and our argument for Africa to be included clearly is going to be in accordance with those principles. And in the end, it is the African Union that is going to take the decision as set out in the Ezulwini Consensus on which countries should be represented on the UN Security Council. The Ezulwini Consensus was very clear that at the very least we want 2 representatives, and if we get more, of course, we will be very pleased. But the decision is not going to be taken by South Africa, nor will it be taken by a single particular country. It will be taken by the African Union. And it will be taken on the basis of representativity as well as on the basis of capacity. And that is what the Ezulwini Consensus put forward. So be rest assured that our position is going to be based on what the African Union decides. As you may well know, we are not the only country that is represented on the African Union. We are just but one of the many countries on our continent. Much as our voice is quite vocal, so are many other countries' voices vocal as well, because we are part of a collective. We don't act alone. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable President. We'll now ask Honorable Powell to ask her supplementary question.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. President, the Pact for the Future aims to accelerate progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Like many nations, South Africa is behind on its targets. The Democratic Alliance's economic justice policy offers a data-driven approach to fast-tracking these goals by shifting away from race-based economic policy. Instead, it proposes prioritizing companies that make the greatest socio-economic input, as measured by the SDGs, when competing at equal levels of price and functionality. Would the executive be open to considering this evidence-based proposal as a pathway towards meeting our SDG commitments, even if it involves rethinking narrow, race-based empowerment policies?
Mr. President.
Honorable Speaker, I would like to believe that the honorable member is clearly aware of what our Constitution says about us as a nation having to redress the imbalances, the inequalities of the past. That is clearly articulated in our Constitution. And even the preamble to our Constitution speaks to that. Now, honorable member ascribes what one would say is redressing the imbalances of the past to being race-based empowerment policies. I would say, with the greatest respect, when you redress the imbalances of the past and deal with the ugly past that this country was subjected to, you have to take demonstrable actions. And our Constitution says some of those must be legislative. Clearly set out in our Constitution that we've got to take legislative actions and a whole number of other means and initiatives to ensure that the ugly past that we have come from becomes a shadow of our past. And through that, yes, there's got to be empowerment. And that empowerment is not only based on the color of people's skins. It is also based on things such as regionality, where people have originated from. It is also based on gender. The women of our country were forever suppressed, and they lived under poverty and inequality. And I then wonder whether, by just continuing as normal as it was done in the past, whether we would ever be able to uplift the women of our country, the young people of our country, people who live in rural areas, and indeed the black people of our country. It has become globally well accepted that you've got to take active steps to deal with a past that holds us back from moving forward to the future. And this is a precept that is clearly articulated in our Constitution. I would not know how one deals with it. And the difference with what we're doing now is what they did in the past. In the past, those who ruled this country were blatant racists. They were unashamed. They were unapologetic. They just, on a race basis, just suppressed the majority and advanced the interests of a minority. In this country, we are advancing the interests of all. And I think it is disingenuous. It really is disingenuous to then say, as we advance the interests of all our people, from a regional point of view, gender point of view, youth point of view, and yes, national group point of view, that in itself works against the development and the attainment of our sustainable development goals. I can say without any equivocation, we will not depart from the path that we have embarked upon for empowerment and transformation. That is something that I will put up here clearly, because it is in our Constitution. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. President. Supplementary question comes from Advocate G. Breitenbach.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and good afternoon, Mr. President.
If you can please bring the mic closer to you.
Given that this matter raises serious questions about the integrity of the Minister's financial dealings.
Honourable Member, we cannot hear you.
May I sit down?
We can hear you now.
Okay. Given that this matter raises serious questions about the integrity of the Minister's financial dealings and the glaring conflict of interest on the part of the Minister, with the startling contradictions in the dodgy loan agreement, illustrated by the fact that the Financial Sector Conduct Authority yesterday debarred and fined the Minister's financial advisor for his part in the VBS debacle, will the President remove the Minister and make the findings of this review public to uphold transparency and accountability in government? I thank you.
Mr. President.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. I did say, and with the active participation of the Minister, and I said that I've requested the Minister to submit to me a report on exactly what has happened. That document report has been submitted together with various annexures, and that is a matter that I'm giving consideration to. Thank you, Honourable Speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable President. The third supplementary question will be asked by the Honourable Mikalakis.
Thank you, Honourable House Chairperson. Mr. President, if you acknowledge that the GNU has made wonderful progress, then the only explanation for siding with everyone but your GNU partners in Tshwane is that you either cannot or will not take a stand against the Premier of Gauteng and lead your own party. Mr. President, which one is it?
The Honourable President. Order, Honourable Members.
Honourable House Chair, without being flippant, I'm tempted to say, what type of a question is that? But then again, to observe the decorum that I should have here, is that in the end, as I said earlier, the issue of how parties work together really depends on their willingness and determination to embrace one another and find solutions, and to listen to one another. And in listening to one another, they should be able to seek solutions. But also in the end, it also depends on the chemistry amongst the participants themselves. And I think we should also rely on the key area of the principles that those who are participants should adhere to. So I will not specifically refer to any of the areas where parties are seeking to work together, be it in Gauteng, in KZN, in the Western Cape, or wherever. That should be left to the participants, guided by key principles that they should all adhere to. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you, Honourable President. Honourable Members.